Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And I have been looking forward to this topic. We're going to talk about how to get mentally fit. And to get mentally fit, you need to ask better questions. Better questions lead to better health. Better health leads to a better life. And our guest today, Marc Champagne, unpacks the mental fitness practices and reflective questions shaping the lives of some of the most successful and brilliant thinkers in the world. Get that right, not thinkers, thinkers. He is the host of the top 50 ranked podcast Behind the Human and co-founded the journaling app KYO. We'll talk about that in a minute, which ended up reaching almost, get this, 87 million people without any paid advertising. That's the power of a good question. He has studied mental fitness practices for over a decade and consults with Fortune 500 companies. Marc's first book, available now, Personal Socrates, explores the pointed questions that stimulate our mental fitness and teach us how to direct our internal narrative to work for us instead of against us. Marc unpacks the prompts and mental fitness practices of legends such as Kobe Bryant, Maya Angelou, Robin Williams, James Clear, Coco Chanel, Stephen Hawking, and many others to bring clarity, intentionality, and possibility to every aspect of your life. Marc, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, my man. What an intro. Thanks for that.
Well, it's so easy to get into this. We had a great talk the other day on your show, and I've been itching for this one. I've been traveling around, getting things, and I'm like, I looked on the calendar today, and I'm like, Yahoo, let's get into it. So maybe for our listeners, how does a guy in today's world write a book called Personal Socrates? I mean, that's a great title. Because it leads you instantly to a question, and you're all about questions.
Yeah.
So it's a very unique way to look at this. So maybe share with us your background. How'd you get into questions? I'm sure because when you ask questions, you always get yourself in trouble, but the trouble's worth the answers oftentimes.
For sure. I mean, I think I have to explain the book title. Then we can jump into the backstory. But when I first heard the name Personal Socrates, because it was actually a guy named Joey Cofone, who's the founder of Baron Fig and the company that published this book, and he said, "You should really call this book Personal Socrates." And I said, "Absolutely not." I'm like, that is the worst name. I'm not a philosopher. I mean, I know of Socrates like most people in the world, and that's about it. I know he's the guy that asked question after question, and that's as far as my knowledge went. So it started off like that, but quickly in diving into Socrates, just going down a Google search essentially, then it became really clear. I'm like, oh yeah, he actually nailed the title of this book, because if I think of definitely the last 5 years of running the podcast and really diving into questions, interviewing people like yourself, I mean, usually there's a question followed by another question, and that, unlocks clarity and intentionality and whatnot in our lives. When I was running that journaling app, it was floated full of questions. So when I was explaining all of this and how I use mental fitness practices through prompts, then it started to make sense. It's like, yeah, you know what? That is the Socratic method. And we all use it, but we don't really think about it much. And I remember seeing, some research and seeing, here we go. We got this guy, Socrates, from 469 BC. So it's going back quite some time. A method he invented that's still around to this day that we're using, but not really intentionally thinking about it, unless you're in academics, right? Or you're a lawyer or a philosopher of some case. Well, how do you take that and wrap it around a narrative or modernize it so that we can intentionally use these questions in our favor, right? And not just use it in an academic setting. So that's, that's what jumped off the whole mission to write the book.
you touched on something I think is really important, and for our listeners, or probably some that might not be familiar with Socrates, or Socrates is someone they saw in a Bill and Ted movie and never really got quite into what that was all about, or heard of the Socratic method. Can you explain the Socratic method
Yeah.
to our listeners so they understand what is the fundamental of that component?
I mean, in its simplest terms, from my research, it was Socrates working with his students to ask a big question that then was followed up by some sort of a clarification question, and then the next question after that, and then another question, until essentially the objective is to get past the surface to a root cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the root of whatever you're looking at, which I mean applies to everything, especially our health, right? But the thing is that the method is even in the literature, it's really only the examples are typically in some sort of academic setting. You don't see it described too much in other ways. So for me, and then there are scholars that have studied Socrates and came up with these 6 question types as well. So there's clarifying questions, there's questions to challenge assumptions, and the other ones I don't remember, and that's the problem. That was the very problem, and that's why I said, okay, there's got to be a better way to simplify this so that it's intuitive and we just do it. Because if I can't remember these 6 question types, first of all, we don't walk around thinking, okay, that's a clarifying assumption question. I mean, I need to input this question here.
Right.
But what we can remember, and this is the structure of the book and how I operate, is first we need to get clear. And when we're clear on either who we are, who we want to become, or where we want to be going, then we need to get intentional and make intentional decisions to support that person. That's all you have to remember, because the third part happens by default. Because when you're clear and intentional, there's an expansion of possibility, because we can see. You can say, that is the path. But you've spent time doing the work, right?
Which is interesting, because now we're living in this feedback system of Wikipedia and Google,
Yeah.
which the only question we ask is ask Google or ask Wikipedia, but it's surface-based knowledge on mathematical algorithms,
Mm-hmm.
and which oftentimes lacks depth and originality, or doesn't build the axion dendrite connections for lateralized thinking
Yeah.
or deeper dives. It's funny because one of my favorite books was Plato's The Death of Socrates.
Okay.
And what's beautiful about that book is, of course, his students, some of the greatest thinkers that have ever existed in mankind, which is so interesting, 2,500 years ago. And we haven't, all technology's advanced, but we haven't advanced past the thinking of that time, really.
So true.
Which is remarkable. But in that book, The Death of Socrates, of course, Socrates historically he's got to drink the poison,
Yeah.
and he's come to the conclusion that he has, or he can say, you know what, I've been misrepresenting the truth to the youth and being disruptive, and that's what they kind of wanted to do. They kind of wanted to, like, just kind of go along with this or go away, because he was a beloved person. But he's like,
nope,
I've worked this all out, and I've decided. The opening is, I have no choice but to drink the poison and die, even though I very much want to live. And so he gathers his greatest students together to convince him of why he shouldn't drink the poison. And he does an argument and a back and forth in each one of these. It's an absolute masterpiece of a book.
Yeah.
And a great testament. And of course, he obviously wins the arguments, because he ended up drinking the poison.
Yeah.
Right or wrong. How did you get to a place that drove you to study this methodology? Like, how did that, were you curious growing up? Was there challenges going up or asking questions, or was there something that spurred you to ask deeper questions?
Well, the method itself kind of just fell into place when starting to think about the book, because I, like many, was just going through this mechanically without really thinking about the method. what really sparked the curiosity to go even deeper and really pursue this was that after a good 4 or 5 years of interviewing all of these, exceptional humans and thinkers, and bringing in the questions that were helping shift their life or pivot their journey or pull them out of challenging situations, um, the art of these questions, I started to notice that would give you the pause required to pause that autopilot essentially and go a different path. So I was collecting these about a decade ago. Before even being in the space at all, I was in the corporate world, brand management and sales and all of that. But in the morning, I'd be reading positive content and positive material. And that's where I stumbled upon journaling or reflection and started seeing, okay, all of these people are taking some time to think
Right.
and they're asking good questions. So I would write the question down. I was doing it digitally at that time, so I'd copy the question, paste it into another app, and it did that for years, until eventually getting really frustrated with the digital solutions, because I'm like, this is so backwards. There are too many steps in the process. It's not fluid. And at the same time, you had apps in the meditation space like Calm and Headspace were starting to take off. So I remember thinking, okay, it's interesting. We're coming into an era where people are open to being guided digitally in some capacity for meditation. But when it comes to journaling, there's not a lot of people talking about this. Or when they talk about it, they're talk about from the perspective of, oh, you're talking about journaling like the girl writing in her diary about the boy at school type thing, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not how I was using it, right? I was reflecting on these prompts. And that's what really started my journey in this space, because then there was an idea to say, well, hey, why don't we try creating something, something that's similar to like a Calm or a Headspace, but specifically in gathering these prompts like I was doing in a backward fashion, but then provide the guidance for people that would download this app and want to start journaling from all of these different people. So it wasn't necessarily our content. And that's how we reached so many people, because we had all of these collaborations, and Apple started to feature the app around the world and whatnot. So that's what really sparked the interest in this space. And then as that business continued and flourished, but then it ultimately financially failed, I had to delete the app, which I'm happy to talk about. But that's when, again, another level around the Socratic method that I didn't know I was doing, but the power of questions showed up, because then I was slipping into a depressive state, because I just deleted this business and this app that was the vehicle to keep me in this mental fitness space that I was so lit up from. And I could feel myself just waking up feeling sick in the morning, not knowing what was next and so forth, and eventually got to the point where I asked myself the question, well, what do I want for my life? And that paused the narrative long enough to put a plan together and ask the next question, well, then who do I need to speak to? Who can help in this journey? That's when the realization was made that it doesn't matter who we are, where we're at in life, we're all one question away from a completely different life at any point.
That's so true. That's so true. And it's ironic today that we everyone, there's this massive drive to automation,
Yeah.
but there's a need for innovation. Yet many people are caught in the machine of automation, as opposed to having the machine of automation create the space for innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And innovation meaning to go within, and automation is an efficiency of thinking. So this morning I took a driver's test,
Okay.
because I had moved to California not that long ago as a foreign national, and I've delayed this driving test for I don't know how long. I've been driving around a beginner's license for a year.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
God, I got
Okay.
to go get this driver's test. Now I remember it brought me back to the first time I had my driver's test, long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away.
No
I
kidding,
wasn't
right?
driving a Tauntaun, but I might as well been.
Yeah.
Um, and I was going through this test today, and it was a completely different experience. I'm kind of like, okay, this is cool. I got to go through this thing, and then I'm like, I'm trying to drive within the parameters that's a sign. Like I had to go from an automated mentality
Yes.
back to I need to pay attention that I'm doing everything right so I pass the damn test. It's like
What a crazy experience.
it was crazy. It was really interesting. Cool that it happened today too. But I think so many people are caught in the machine of automation,
Yeah.
right? They wake up in the morning, they automatically check their Facebook posts or their text messages, right? When they're standing in lineup, they automatically scroll to the latest YouTube or whatever their source media, their DMZ app or whatever. They automate their payment, their selection of information from various sources that they picked, and they don't go outside of those lanes. And therefore, they get a very efficient life, but don't ask innovative questions. And I think a lot of people are caught here in this world, and there's a malaise that happens.
Yeah.
You see kids that are cutting themselves and stuff because they're not feeling themselves anymore because everything
Yeah.
is so automated. You just press a button and Amazon delivers everything, right? Like there's,
It numbs you out.
it numbs you out. For people that are in that state right now, they know they're in a mental rut. They know that they're just doing the same thing and they can't get. How do you access, how do you bring your own personal Socrates into the life to start firing off some questions, take you down the rabbit hole, which is often tumbling down there. It's kind of a dark, uncertain, anxiety-ridden thing to get to a place where you can come out the other side to a whole new world. What is that process like, and how do you innovate? Like, how do you do that?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is that we need to be honest with ourselves in terms of where we're currently at, right? Like get real truthful of the fact of, okay, I feel like I'm here and I'd like to be here, for example, right? And understand, okay, there might be a big gap there, and be kind to yourself. Let's not, pass judgment on how you got there, and let all that stuff go, and know that it's a process, because it's not any different than the physical world, right? In terms of physical exercise. I mean, I know your backstory. I mean, you're not going to end up winning, bodybuilding championship the first time you ever pick up a dumbbell or do any weights. I mean, there's a process there. Or
10 years to win my first show.
Exactly. And I mean, our mental fitness, for me, it's automatic now in a good way, in the sense that every morning I have time dedicated to these practices. The practices change and evolve and based on, what I feel like I need. But that time in the early morning has taken a good 12 years to get to the point where there's got to be a pretty significant event or something going on in the evening before for me to go and do that, because I know that's going to disrupt the next morning, and that hour dictates the next 23 hours of my day.
But what is that hour? What is that hour?
That hour is a mix of mental and physical fitness. So the first thing I do, wake up, big glass of water, a couple sprays of B12 to kick things off, and then typically I do a short meditation or breath work, whatever feels right. So it might be just a 10-minute kind of mindfulness meditation. I'm not using apps as much anymore, just trying to focus on the breath. I'm enjoying like a Wim Hof style breath work these days, which is fun to use any of those breath hold versions, because you can stack in another practice. So on the holds, I'm often visualizing an event or goals or something like that, like, jumping into kind of where I want the future to play out. Then from there, there's usually some physical exercise, whether weights, spinning, even a walk, something to move the body and get things going and fired up. And everything wraps up usually with some sort of reflection. And often that's journaling. The method of journaling, I think, is less important than the actual practice, which is the reflection. So that can be pen to paper, that can be an app, that could be just leaving yourself an audio note, that could be on your walk, just thinking of, well, how do I feel right now? Where do I feel that in my body? Do I feel tight and anxious? Is that in my chest? Okay, often just acknowledging where it is releases it. And now you're not carrying that in, or that mental clutter and fog into your day. So for me, that's why the morning is critical, and it starts me up in a great way. And usually too, actually while my coffee's brewing, and this just takes seconds. People can start here if this is where they want to fire it up. But I have Ryan Holiday's book, The Daily Stoic, leaning up against the coffee machine, and I'll read one passage, which again, Stoicism is just a great way to reframe or add in a different perspective of whatever might be going on in your life, thinking, okay, I'm not the only one that's like feeling like this, or people have handled this, or just subtly shifts, something that may be bothering you and primes your mind to start the day on the right foot. So yeah, so that's, I mean, it's been, but going back to your original question, I mean, that's taken over a decade to get to that point of really, really prioritizing the time, and then also having a list of tools in the toolkit to pull from based on what's going on. So
like a mental gym, like it's like having the barbells and the dumbbells and the universal and the pull.
yeah,
Like you've got a whole set of mental gym equipment that allows
yeah,
you to become a much robust thinker than say someone who just hits the Google button.
exactly. And then the thing is that the more you do this, and even if if you're doing this 10 minutes a day in the morning, the more you're training your mind like this, the more then you start to catch yourself when you're standing in line at the supermarket about to grab for the end cap display items that are not nutritious pieces of food, right? Or like, there's so many examples, and you provided a whole bunch of good ones there that were just on autopilot. You catch yourself, and then you can make a different decision. So for people that are, just trying to get started, the easiest way to do this is to figure out a time in your routine. Again, I highly advise the morning, but I understand that everyone's different. But the morning just gives you the best chance for success because life hasn't happened yet. Prioritize the time, put it in your calendar so you've committed to that, and list out 5 to 10 things, activities, things that you can do that will make you feel good, right? And that could be yoga for someone, meditation, journaling, a walk, so many different things. But the things that for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, will put a smile on your face and make you feel good. And then you have your toolkit and you're ready to go, and you can start experimenting, right, with these things. And you can turn to those items on the list in the middle of the day if you get that email that bothers you or sends you an emotional response where normally you would carry that emotion throughout the rest of the day, and it throws your whole day off, versus just, okay, pause, acknowledge what's happening here, release that, and then you can carry on.
That's great. You touched on one little piece there. I think that's really good. And in your routine is that was you were using apps, but now you're kind of moving away from it. So I think a lot of people are so hopelessly hooked on the digital system that as an app is an easy way to exit into a more creative or thoughtfulness space. To clear the mind, to empty the mind, to defrag, whatever you want to call it. Over this journey of over a decade of cultivating this practice, can you talk about maybe where you started and then when you dropped off, like where this, like with the evolutionary points?
Yeah. Well, so you make a good point with technology, because unfortunately, I think that the majority of us have an unhealthy relationship with our technology, right? And it becomes challenging when you have to rely on willpower to navigate technology. So I only say that because, this morning, for example, I did journal in an app. It's not my own anymore because that one's gone. It's Day One is the name of the app. But at the beginning, I had started journaling digitally because at the time my job was requiring me to travel a lot, and I just liked the idea of having it on an iPad, for example. And my iPad was like a sanctuary. There was 0 notifications on that iPad. The only thing I could do was or I should say there was nothing that would pull me away from the task at hand unless I decided to go there. And I've continued that philosophy in the sense that the first screen on my phone are all apps for my mind and body. And there are no notifications there. Everything is disabled on my phone until at least 9 a.m. And I'm getting up at 5:30 to do this routine. So there are no notifications. And when I'm on that first screen, I'm 3 swipes away until I'm anywhere near social media icons. So for me, it's okay. Do I falter? Sure, sometimes. I mean, I'm in the middle of this book launch, so I'm eager to see what's happening.
Sure.
But for the most part, that routine has worked. But if you're just starting off, I mean, I think it's like anything, even eating. I mean, if your kitchen is full of sugary food and garbage food, I mean, you're setting yourself up to eat like garbage, essentially. Don't have that stuff in the house. So if you're just getting started on the mental fitness side of things, think of the environment that will be conducive and help you support the practice to get started, right? Just give you the best chance for success.
Yeah, my spiritual teacher said a statement that I repeat all the time, and that is environment is stronger than will.
Oh, yeah.
And that
Right?
cultivate, and on top of that, what was really interesting is in Dr. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, I think it was, or it might have been Beyond Order. He says, find one little place in your house and make it as beautiful as possible.
Yeah.
Or set things, like make your bed and set things in order before you go out and start breaking down everybody else's. And people go, well, that sounds awfully simplistic, but it comes back to switching the mind into cultivating an environment. Okay, you know what? I'm going to clean up my room and have it orderly. I'm going to put myself together as best as possible. And just by doing those things, how the world sees you and how the world begins to interact with you automatically changes.
Of course.
And then you, as you see that progress, well, maybe you have a room in your house you want to build. Maybe you want to get a better home, and that leads you to, well, how do I make more money, or what kind of characteristics? And so this space, allowing an organic development of these questions and the things. So how do you build upon, say, maybe first principle, quite like how did someone get started, but then start stacking these tools like a master trainer would put together a strength and conditioning card. So I go like, okay, you're going to do squats here and leg presses here and lunges here, and then we're going to go to hams, and I look at, okay, structuring a program through the beginner, the intermediate, and then you get to advanced training, which you're getting into very hyper specifics with that individual. I think mental fitness is very similar. Absolutely. What's the process that you've learned over all this time that people might benefit from?
Well, the main thing is to be open and experiment and try different things. What does that
mean to you? Explain. People say that I want to be open. Does that mean like I go have sex with 100 different people? Am I right? Or like what does open mean from a mental side of things? And how hard is it to be open?
Yeah, that's the great questions. I mean, open to me, I'll give a specific example because there's probably people listening that can resonate with this. But I remember, first jumping into journaling, like that was my baseline. Like that, journaling is like squats essentially. It's kind of the core thing for me. And with that, the more you read about the practice, the more you study, people like Jordan Peterson, and Robin Sharma was one that I've been reading a lot about. You start seeing these other practices. And if you can hold back from judging those other practices, and the example I'll give is I interviewed this woman, a neuroscientist, Johns Hopkins trained, but also incredibly passionate in the cosmos and all of the moon energy and all of this stuff. And she actually left her training to then go and really lead people into harnessing energy, essentially. And I judged that stuff hard. I was like, I'm not going to start pulling out tarot cards or what like that. These are the things that was running through my mind. But it wasn't until I reached out to her, and her name's Jill Winterstein. She's in the book, and she runs the Instagram account Spirit Daughter, that I started to then learn about all of this, cosmology and whatnot. And, this stuff has been around since the beginning of time and got to the point where, like, I don't know if I believe all of it yet. I'm probably not there. But what I do believe is that if I'm going to visualize goals, if I'm going to journal about what's going on, there's zero downside in me aligning that with stuff that I don't understand that's happening around us, and we're all energy anyway. And if the moon can move the tide, there's some serious stuff going on, right? And that's what I mean by being open. And since then, I've interviewed and tried different modalities like sound healing. I got into men's work because of that. In my men's group, I really credit them to saving me from some really dark years when I had to delete that app. And there's still, we meet every second Monday. I wouldn't have been exposed to any of these practices without doing everything possible to just hold back on the judgment, or the judgment on the practice, and then the self-judgment of me going through that. And I see that with people starting with journaling too. There's a lot of people that journal in the way that, they think they're going to submit that journal to Fast Company or something,
right?
And it's just, again, so if any of these practices, if you can start with first identifying what lights you up, but then setting some principles and writing down, anything I write in this journal, that's for me unless I decide to share that. I will not judge what I'm writing on this paper. I don't care about grammar, structure. These are the founding principles, and you can do that for all of these practices. And then that at least gets you started. And then obviously you'll find the routine that really works well. And then as you're exposed to more things, like for me, the last few years, breath work has been a big one. Now that's, I'm stacking the breath work with the visualization. Before that, and I desperately miss this, just when I was living in Toronto, I was going to a local gym that had a steam room. And in the steam room, that would be part of my practice. I would do the visualization or, close my eyes and set some intentions for the day. Like, how do I want to show up for others and myself today? What does that look like? The next visualization is to have that in my own home, because I'm not in that same location. But now I'm bringing in the breath work to do that same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how I think you can advance from starting to having fun and experimenting with all of these different practices, because there's so many things. It's just like physical exercise. There are a million different things you can do to keep things fresh and exciting.
I want to switch gears a little bit, because you brought it up a couple of times, and that was the deletion of your app and kind of a dark place where you were in. And I think for a lot of people, particularly in this last 18 months or so, a lot of people have been brought into a dark place. The certainties of their governments, of their medical system, their ability to travel, like there's been a tremendous pullback on personal autonomy, freedom, and whether you're in supportive of, not supportive of it, I think people can recognize there's been a major pullback and a huge disruption, which for the evidence is showing a lot of people are going to a dark place. Mm-hmm. Depression, suicide, addiction to pills, addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs, proliferation of unintended consequences, which are devastating for both individuals and families and ultimately society. What would you say to the person, based on your own experience, of what kind of questions you need to ask when you're in the darkness? And do you go deeper into it to get to the core, or do you ask questions to get out of it? Which methodology do you ascribe to?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on Masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
That's a great perspective there. Yeah, I think, without going too far into the weeds on this one, I mean, it's when you marry up a stifling of curiosity, i.e., holding back from asking questions, because that's my thing. I mean, I think we come out born curious, asking questions. I have a 5-year-old that is reminding of my wife and I every day of that fact, right? And my goal is to not, to keep them as curious as possible, because if we can keep that, then that's what we learn, that's what we challenge, that's how we grow. So, when we're kind of getting forced to not ask questions and whatnot and going to autopilot with fear, then that's a scary recipe that's happening, right? So for anyone that's there, and a lot of us are, just given everything that's going on, I think the biggest thing is to pause again through any of these practices and do everything possible to focus on what you can control. And this is going back to the Stoicism philosophies, right? And there's a profile in the book with Ryan Holiday and Marcus Aurelius, and it's just what is within my control. Because a lot of the stuff is not within our control, except for how we react to what's happening, right? And there are
most things.
Yes, and there are some key variables that we do have control over, and if we focus on those, then there is also a sense of hope, in that flow, for example. Then I think the biggest thing is just really understanding where you're currently at and who you want to become, right? Where do you want to go? I mean, that, the questions that are progressive are the ones, at least for me, that help me out of those dark moments. Because at first, the short story is, I left that corporate world. I created that app, or co-founded. We had a small team. We reached 86.9 people, or 86.9 million people with the app. But that didn't mean our revenue model and business model was working. It wasn't. And people were coming in just as fast as they were leaving, essentially. So long story short, we had to shut the business down. But in doing that, it wasn't just shutting a business down. It was essentially deleting an app and deleting my identity for the last 3 years. And I had left a job that, I wasn't unhappy in. It was just, I would regret not trying this. And now I started asking all the wrong questions, or reflecting on the wrong questions, like, how could we fail at such a colossal level? What would my ex-colleagues think? What would my family think, were the ones that were supporting me throughout this and whatnot? And that just keeps pushing you down into the ground. It's okay to reflect on, why did it happen, to learn from those lessons so you don't repeat those mistakes. But if you keep going down and down, and I could feel it happening. And it wasn't until really dialing into the present moment, which anyone right now, if you're struggling with what's going on, you can do that, right? I remember deleting the app in a co-working space in Toronto and thinking, all right, my life feels like it's exploding because I have no plan forward, and I have no job now. We live in a city that's incredibly expensive, and I don't know how we're going to afford our bills. And to pause that, I had to stop and think, well, you know what? I just deleted this app on a laptop that most people in the world don't have, or don't have access to. And just to bring in these micro moments of gratitude that, what, can figure it out, right? And just enough to pause it. So for people that are going through a tough time now, just finding those little moments of appreciation cuts the narrative or pauses it. And then you can bring in those progressive questions. For me, it was, what do I want for my life, right? For others, it could be, well, what's within my control? And if I don't like how I'm feeling or what's going on, well, what can I do about it?
Right.
And then it pushes you down. This is the Socratic method, because then that leads to other questions, other people.
It's beautifully said. And And I think if you look at many of the great philosophers of life, they had very dark periods in their life, which drove them, I think, both into the negative set of questions as well as the light set, if you will.
Yeah.
And Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force and a whole series after this, is a great philosopher and psychiatrist and spiritual teacher. Talks about the relative energy fields of thoughts and feelings and emotions and processes. And he touched on something that's really important. And when in the darkness of whatever current life situation, and everybody's going to experience this, it's pretty much unavoidable in human condition. And I don't even know if it should be avoided. Something to be avoided. Maybe we should celebrate the life-altering challenges in our life, as painful as they might be, because once traversed, it's slaying the dragon, if you will, and the gold is hidden by the dragon. The dragon is within ourselves, and the higher energy is the call to adventure, the call to the unknown, the call to the unfamiliar territory, which was talked about by Jung in the collective unconsciousness, or Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. Even Nietzsche, who saw the nihilistic nature of going into, he predicted would lead to a major world catastrophe and the death of hundreds of millions of people, which he was right, because he said without this overarching idea of a divinity, a divine personage, like that's why he said the death of God, which wasn't something he was celebrating. He said it was going to be devastating because the mind needed an ideal to strive for. And he came up with the idea of the Übermensch, which was kind of distorted by the Nazis, unfortunately. But the idea was the Superman, the idealistic self, represented by Christ or by Buddha or by Krishna, or a long line of spiritual traditions. In this, most of the scientific thinkers look at some giant in their history, which they resonate to drive thoughts to overcome very complex and difficult questions. Is there a way, or is there when someone's caught in that real dark place, where is there some, okay, gratitude. How often do you repeat it? Do you got to just keep because you kind of come out for a little bit and then you go back down, and it's like a heavyweight fight or something. You're getting knocked down.
Well, but we need those constant reminders. I there's two things that, just so I don't forget. There's a profile I wrote on Apollo Ono, who's a short track speed skater. I think at the time, I think he's still the most decorated Winter Olympian in U.S. history. And he shared a practice. And then the other one, I think that's relevant right now to everything you're saying, is something I wrote about Marcus Aurelius and his belief systems. Apollo Ono, though, I remember interviewing him and having a chat and thinking about his Olympic level reminder system, which was and still is Post-it notes, and he just identified, okay, well, where are the areas in my house that I'm most frequently in? And he spent the time getting clear in terms of what he was working towards. And he just wrote down little reminders, whether they're little affirmations or reminders of his goal, so he could see them all the time, because it doesn't take, again, we just pick up our phone and that could, throw us into another realm. So we need those little micro resets or those reminders. Even writing the book, I had all these little cue cards near my desk, just reminding me, write as if you're writing to a friend of yours. It's quantity over quality in the first draft, just things because my mind kept going, I'm not submitting this to an editor. I mean, I'm embarrassed by what I'm writing here, right? But just the reminders. But on a bigger level, you touched on it, and this is what I learned from studying Marcus Aurelius. You nailed it. I mean, in those times, I mean, I think he lost 13 or 14 of his children in his life.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the death rate among Caesars is 40% or something would be killed by the people around you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a different time, but losing a child, I mean, it's still, we can't even fathom that, if that happens once, obviously. So then, the question for me, how the hell did he do it? How did he lead Rome through these massive plagues, through these giant battles, being away for years, losing children. Like, how did he do it? And the this is my opinion, but the conclusion I came to were around his belief systems. And, you know, there was obviously Stoic philosophy and his meditations and all of that, which made me start to think and ask the questions for others. What are your belief systems? Because we're normally born into a belief system and raised in a belief system. We may still resonate with them, whether that's religious views, philosophy, science, other things, but understanding what we were essentially forced into it because we grew up in that environment. Does that still resonate with you? And if not, you know, what does? What would serve you well? Because then you can lean back on these things. For me, I mean, I never grew up with any type of Stoic philosophy, but I started to read about this stuff, and it's a huge pillar. So for me, it's I try to live life with three main principles: Stoic philosophy guiding those moments when they're very challenging to reset perspective. I believe that my actions and thoughts do have some sort of result in or link to energy, and then and something will come from that. And then I also believe that just kindness wins, you know, and I get that one from my parents. I mean, just be kind. If we default to kindness, you usually can't go wrong. But, you know, you've got to spend some time thinking about that, right? And getting clear, because then when you're in these tough moments, again, like what we're faced with right now, you can feel the comfort or the confidence that your overall belief systems can help you there. And that list of other tools that you have that you know will make you feel good, that'll help you there, right? And then we can stay on the track that we've designed, or the life that we've designed, a little bit more easily, and not be so rocked off the track all the time.
It's really great. And I would guess maybe what are some of the other tools that you, and I don't want to give away the book per se, but what are some of the other things that you feel is important? We've got kind of setting the tone in the morning with your practice. And then obviously there's, you know, this question process about things, or knowing where you're at, finding out where you're going. And then obviously there's a study of great thinkers. It would seem that's also would be some of the earmarks of what you're doing. What other things, or is there other things that you draw from maybe some of our more sophisticated listeners who have maybe developed a lot of these practices or things, but have found a stagnant rut? They're kind of, you know, right, you know, I've got the income thing figured out. I got the 401k, I got the wife, I got the kids, I got the retirement, you know, I'm doing good. I'm trying to do this little biohack. Like, you know, they say the death of the enemy of greatness is good.
Yeah, it's well said.
Right. So what are some other things, or maybe some of the more radical ideas, or like really when you're trying to push innovation once you've had a well-rounded game?
Well, so I would say thinking bigger, you know, and the questions that can train your mind to do that, and seek other questions, seek other details to think at a different level. And I remember interviewing someone by the name of Naveen Jain. You know Naveen? Well, of course you would know, just with the health link, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And he's in the book as well. And the whole principle behind this profile and this thinking is around the idea of imagine if, you know, you did this, or you were working on whatever project. Imagine if that was possible. And it is possible. Anything's possible. It's our imagination that tells us whether it is or not, right?
Most of us live in what was previously impossible for most of humanity.
Yeah, right? It's anything.
The fact anyone's listening to this was virtually impossible only a decade or two ago. You know what I mean? Not totally. The other day. This conversation and the person listening to this was not possible.
Exactly.
For most of human history.
Well, and even I remember Naveen sharing an example of we've all heard this one about the sky is the limit, And he's like, the sky actually isn't the limit. The sky doesn't even exist. It's a figment of our imagination. It's not like when you're in a spacecraft, you're like, oh, just went through the sky. It's not there, right? So, I mean, it's more of a humorous example, but I think it sets the tone that think in terms of possibility. And the way Naveen thinks about this is, how can I solve a billion person challenge? And if you can solve a billion person challenge, you create $1 billion business by default often, right? If that's what's motivating you. But if you're really trying to help a billion people, you have to think differently, right? And you spend some time thinking about what is it, right? And just in the work that he's doing with biome and looking at the gut and what we're eating and how we're all so different. I mean, his big hypothesis is to make chronic disease a choice. I mean, that's a big statement to make. So then that leads to the next questions. Well, what do I need to do? Who needs to surround me to do that? And what he shared and what's in the profile here, when you're thinking like this, people can feel that and people gravitate. And often the smartest people in the world gravitate because they want to be a part of that mission, right? When you're thinking of solving these massive challenges. So, I mean, that's the big one. But the other thing is just using these practices, because we've talked a lot about like helping in the moment when things are stressful and whatnot. And obviously these tools are really effective for that. But the whole other side is just unlocking another world of opportunity. So something as simple as, if you're stuck and you're trying to figure out the next steps for something, writing down, what do I need to do next? Go to sleep, wake up the next morning, have your glass of water, and answer the question. That one has come up. I do that one all the time, and I'm always amazed that literally within 8 or 9 hours previously, I had no answer. And then now I'm sitting there and everything's flowing out, and I've just allowed my mind some stillness while I'm sleeping to actually let the mind connect the dots, because we have the answers. It's all there. It's just a matter of making, just like a physical room, if it's jammed floor to ceiling with boxes, if we can blow out the boxes and see the door in the back, then it becomes easy, because we can see the path, right? And our minds are the same thing. They're clogged with relationships, decisions, emotions that are bothering us. So the more we do these practices, the more we clear out that mental clutter and that fog, again, the more we can see and expand all of that possibility or opportunity, I should say. So that's one. And then, I mean, sleep is another big one. And I'm not just saying this because of you guys, but I mean, I do take your magnesium product, and it's been a game changer for me. But I have that layered in with the times I can feel where my mind is starting to spin a bit and feels a bit heavy. I'll do a journaling exercise before bed, and I'll release that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And always finish with some sort of gratitude. Like, what can I celebrate about the day? We forget about. There's so much awesome that happens each day. If we just take 2 minutes to think, what can I celebrate about today? The micro moments, right? And then you go to sleep. Often you fall asleep faster because you don't have your mind spinning. If you've got a lot on your plate, you can start with just listing out 2 or 3 things you want to do tomorrow. Then that's done. That's out of your mind now. Finish off with the gratitude. The other thing, going back to those visualization practices, it's another fun way to fall asleep, is just dropping into your own movie, essentially. Think about, where are you heading? What are you striving to do and be? What are you working on? And just drop in as if that's completely real. And again, your mind starts putting together the pieces. I mean, there's good science on this. Your mind is growing new pathways or forming new pathways when you do this stuff. So this is the other side of the coin.
Right on. Before we wrap up, I got another kind of leading back to earlier where we started. And that is decision-making fatigue.
Yeah.
And asking good questions. So almost every entrepreneur that scales a company runs into decision-making fatigue. And that is, so for those who aren't familiar with the concept, it's you have so much glucose available to your brain to make decisions. And you spend at a certain level inside a company growth or in a business growth, or so you want to be thinking on higher level complexity. I always say that you want to solve a volume of questions, then you want to solve an intensity of questions that kind of take out your business. Then it's complexity, and complexity requires space, and space means that you need to free up RAM or how many decisions you make. Because let's just say an arbitrary number, you can make 1,000 decisions in a day. Well, the decision to answer the text message, the decision to answer your Facebook post, the decision whether I'm going to have eggs or coffee, and of course, famously, that was taken to the nth degree by guys like Steve Jobs that wore the same clothes every day and all that sort of stuff, right? Reducing decisions down to, almost everything was autopilot, so you could spend time. How do you suggest, or what have you found to free up the energetic space, the like, how do you reduce the redundant decisions so that you can spend time on the big questions?
Well, the biggest thing is to allocate the time to create that space, and that doesn't feel normal in our society.
Right.
I think the sooner we can get over this notion of productivity, and then that means that you have to check off a million things off your list to say, yeah, that was a good day. Like once we can release that, then you're on a new path there. Just like reading books, we have this with books all the time. You want to check off, I read 100 books this year. Right. Or, you know what? I read a couple really good books, but I read them slow and I actually applied that knowledge, right? And that's why the book is set up in 2 to 4 page profiles for a reason. That can be your mental fitness for the day. It takes 10 minutes, right? But we talked about Robin Sharma. I have his latest book, what is it called? Let's see right there. The Everyday Hero Manifesto. And I remember, it's right before the launch. There was so much going on, and I could feel my mind was starting to spin. Yeah. And so the night before, I went through that gratitude practice, let some of that stuff go. And I put his book right in the center of my desk. I put a pen, a journal, and a bottle of water. So as soon as I'm getting up, I'm going right there. Everything's there. I just need to open the book. And then I knew I was going downstairs to do, I think I did a Peloton spin or something like that. Right. And so all I have to do is get up. That's the decision to be made. And getting up is not a problem anymore. And I learned this from Kobe Bryant. He's in the book as well. He used to get in an extra workout, a 4th workout every day from the team, getting up at 4 in the morning. And the reason he was able to get up like that consistently was because he had this goal of winning the NBA championship. He had the same internal negotiation with himself lying in bed. I don't want to get up. I'll get in the workout later, or I can do this later. But we all know what happens later. Life happens later, and we don't do it. Yep. So his motivator was that. For me, I know that I really want to go into this launch of the book clear. So I want to be able to see, okay, well, here's the opportunity. There's fancy stuff dangling over here. That may be fun, but that's not really going to fuel the ecosystem that I'm trying to work in. So, but I can't see that if I'm not clear. So I think just, back to your original question, just thinking of the things and setting your day up, especially your morning, in a way that will set you up for success is one way to do that. And when it comes to big decisions, this is going back to Naveen, actually. He shared an awesome practice that I think we can relate to. He's often presented with these massive decisions and often investments that equate to millions of dollars, if not more. And he said, you know what, I get all the information. I have the team. I'm seeing all these spreadsheets and all the presentations. But at the end of the day, the decision is made with one practice for him. And he takes 15 minutes. And he said, sometimes I tell people I need 15 minutes. Everyone needs to leave. He says, I close my eyes. And for 15 minutes, I visualize the decision having been made. And I see myself 6 months down the road. Does it feel right? Mm-hmm. And if there's any sense that it feels off, the answer is no matter how good the data looks.
Right.
And he said, he's like, Mark, I've saved millions of dollars because of that. Even though it doesn't look on the onset that looks like a logical decision, and the next thing you know, 3 months from there, something blows up or whatever in that business or whatever it is, right? But again, I think it comes back to that stillness, right? Because we're just rarely still. But the benefits of being still show up all the time. It's like when we have the ideas going for a run, or we're in the shower and the ideas come up. It's because your mind's still, right? You're not jamming in PowerPoints or spreadsheets or worrying about this, worrying about that. You're doing something to help still your mind or calm your mind.
The book is called Personal Socrates. And Mark,
great title, right?
Beautiful title. I think we've only caught a few little tidbits, and I encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. I'm excited to dive into it myself. Can you share where people can reach you, get access to your book, and follow you on this journey of rethinking their life by asking better questions?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, just thank you for having me. I feel like you and I can talk for hours. We need another podcast. The easiest place is behindthehuman.com. That's my personal website. I have all the links, but I mean, you can find the book on Amazon directly from the publisher, Baron Fig, as well. Audible. It's all in the regular places. But behindthehuman.com is where the book is, the podcast, also all my social handles. And, tag me, shoot me a message. I would love to know whether they're in the book or not, but just the questions that have really made an impact in your life. Because you can probably tell I'm a bit obsessed with prompts, and I literally have a spreadsheet of thousands of these questions from interviews and just my own study. So, nothing would light me up more than seeing a prompt from someone else.
There you have it, folks. Marc Champagne. The book is called Personal Socrates. And if there's ever been a time for you to step back and take a pause, take a reflection, get a practice of asking yourself better questions, it will inevitably lead to a more rich and fuller experience of the human condition. I want to thank you for joining us today, Marc, and I want to thank you, the listener, for staying this long and kind of winding through the thought processes and practices. I would encourage you to get the book. I think this might be a very powerful episode for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. The question that always comes up is, what area are you struggling in? And asking better questions will get you out of the struggle and into the success. And that's what we hope for you today. I'm Wei T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers. This is another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. If you liked it, share it. If you hated it, tell us. And if you're indifferent, well, hopefully you'll come back next time. Take care. Lots of love. Wei T. Lightheart. Ciao.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.